named Steven, and he was a programmer working from home, which honestly explained a lot about him. He didn't leave the house much, and he didn't really need to either. Between work, movies, and video games, he was pretty much a couch potato. But Steve had another hobby, one he didn't really talk about. He watched people, mostly girls, and mostly on Instagram, but sometimes in real life too. And lately, his favorite subject happened to live right across the street, the Johnsons, husband Max and wife Chloe. Now, I want to be clear about something here because Stephen wasn't into Chloe, not like that. And 2 weeks, the only thing he actually said to her was good morning, and that was just the once. What he was actually into was a theory. He was convinced Chloe was having an affair, and Stephen, with his brand new binoculars and his bedroom curtains that were always pulled almost shut, had basically appointed himself the guy who was gonna prove it. So it was Wednesday morning, and Stephen was at his desk, second floor, window right beside him, which was basically the best seat in the house. If you were the type who liked watching the street for fun, and he saw Max walk out with a briefcase and a bag, and not his usual bag either, something bigger this time. Then Chloe came out to say goodbye, and the way she said it, it was obvious Max wasn't just heading to the office, he was leaving, maybe overnight, maybe longer. And Steven knew exactly what that meant because this wasn't the first time. Last time Max left town, someone showed up at that house after dark. And now Steven didn't know who the guy was, didn't know his name, but he'd already decided that was the lover. He had to be. So if Max was leaving again and Steven was right about all this, then tonight was finally the night he'd get his proof. He could barely believe his luck. The day dragged on and nobody showed up. So Steven finished his work, threw up a movie, same as any other night. Then, around 8, Chloe stepped outside just to take the trash out. Totally normal. But Steven's eyes went straight to her anyway. And at this point, the movie was basically just background noise. Binoculars were already in his hand. Then, about an hour later, a car pulled up outside the Johnson house. And Steven didn't even need a second look because he already knew exactly who that was. The man got out and headed inside, and Steven tried to catch anything he could through those windows, any little glimpse. But the angle was bad and the curtains were doing their job. So all he really got was the bedroom light clicking on. And that was enough for him. He smirked, settled back in, and kept watching. And that's when he noticed something. It was quiet out there, like really quiet. No cars, nobody walking a dog, nothing at all. Just silence. And it was the kind where you ended up hearing these things you normally wouldn't, like a doorbell. It was faint, but out there in that kind of quiet, Stephen heard it clear as day. So he shifted the binoculars back to the front door, and there they were, two kids standing a little way back, not right up against the door, just standing there, like 10, maybe 12-year old. Chloe opened the door and asked, "Can I help you?" One of the kids said they were lost, that they were need to find their parents. So Chloe asked the obvious stuff. Where they get separated, were their parents with them? They didn't know their way home, but nothing. No answer to any of it. Just the same line again, word for word. We are lost. We need to get back to our parents. Can we use your phone? And that's it. Stephen was listening as hard as he could, and the voices weren't perfectly clear from that, but he was catching enough. Then the man stepped up behind Chloe and said something Stephen couldn't make out. But he made the gesture, come on in, and the kids started walking. Slow, not eager, not scared either. Just slow, and both of them looking down the whole time. They walked through the door, and it closed behind them. Stephen just kept staring at that door, and just like that, all the fun kind of drained out of him. Then, a couple of minutes later, the Johnson's house went dark. Not just a room, but the whole house, all at once. And here's the thing, every other house on the street still had their lights on. Stephen didn't really know what to make out of that, but put him in the weird mood, so he shut his laptop, called it a night, and tried not to think about it too much. But the next morning, his eyes went straight back to that house, and the lover's car was still parked out front. Now, Stephen wasn't exactly the outdoorsy type, and he didn't take walks ever. But that morning, for the first time in who knows how long, he found himself putting on his shoes. He told himself it was just to stretch his legs. But really, he just wanted to he just wanted an excuse to walk past that house, get a look inside, see this guy's face, and finally put one to the theory he'd built up in his head. So he headed out, walk around the block, nothing really planned. Then, on his way back around, decided, almost on impulse, that he was going to knock on their door and ask for something. He hadn't even figured out what yet. He got to the doorstep and rang the bell. Nobody answered. So he rang it again, and still nothing. But here's the strange part, he couldn't feel it. Somebody was standing right on the other side of that door. No footstep, no sound at all. Just that feeling you get sometimes when you know you're really not actually alone. Anybody home? He called out, but no one answered. But the feeling didn't go away. If anything, it got sharper. So he stepped back from the door and moved over to a living room window, figuring maybe he'd catch a glimpse of Chloe or this guy, anyone. But there was nothing there. The house looked completely empty, except it didn't feel empty. Not to him. He leaned a little closer, trying to see past the gap in the curtains. And then, just like that, the curtain got yanked shut, fast, right in front of him. Stephen jumped back. His heart started pounding. He never saw a hand, never saw anything pull it. It just moved on its own, like someone on the other side had grabbed it and pulled. And that's when Stephen figured someone must seen him at that window. Probably Chloe, maybe the guy. So he panicked a little and went to his house. The whole way back, that curtain movement kept replaying in his head. Nobody was standing there, and he was sure of that. And yet, it moved like somebody had grabbed it. But by the time he got home, he talked to himself into an explanation. The guy was probably just standing off to the side. Didn't want to be seen, so grabbed the curtain without thinking. And it made sense, mostly. So he shook it off, got back to work, and went on with his day. Except every so often, without really meaning to, his eyes would drift back over to the Johnson's house, waiting for something, anything. But nothing moved, not once, even all day. And that night, same as before, the house sat there completely dark. No lights, nothing. And that's when it actually started to sink in for Stephen that maybe something really did happen over there. But here's the thing about Steven. He didn't want to get involved, and he didn't want to be the guy who called something in and turned out to be wrong. Or worse, the guy who got dragged into whatever this actually was. So instead, he just stopped watching, put the binoculars away, told himself it wasn't his problem. Next day, same story. Still, no lights. And at that point, he actually considered calling someone, the police, maybe just to check. But he talked himself out of it and told himself it let's give it a day. Truth is, he didn't care about Chloe and he didn't care about the husband either. Not really. He just wanted to know what happened in that house because it had been days now and nothing, absolutely nothing had moved. Then, same as always, Stephen wrap up work by 5 and settle in for a movie around 8. And that's when the doorbell rang. He headed downstairs and checked the peephole first, but nobody was there. Figured it was just some kid messing around, so he yanked the door open, ready to say something, and there they were, two kids standing right here on his porch. Steven said, "What do you want, kid?" The kid didn't answer. So he started to say something else, but one of them cut him, flat voice and all. "Our parents will come pick us up. Can we stay in your house till they come?" And that's when it hit him. These were the same kids, the ones from Chloe's porch. Something about that just felt wrong. Steven said, "Let me check with my family," which didn't even make sense since he lived alone, but it was the first thing that came out of his mouth. So he shut the door and stepped back inside. For a second, he just stood there, and his mind was already racing back to that night. Same kids. It had to be. So he opened the door again and said, "No, sorry, can't do that. We're actually about to head out. You could try the neighbors though." The kids didn't say anything. They just looked at him, and with the porch light behind them, the way it was, he couldn't really make out of their faces at all. Just shapes. So Steven shut the door. He moved into the window, watching, waiting for them to walk off. But they didn't. They were still standing there, exact same spot, still facing the door. Stephen peeked through the gap in his curtain, watching them, and after a minute, he kind of shook it off. He told himself, whatever, just some weird kids and not his problem. So he headed to the kitchen, grabbed a bag of Doritos out of the cupboard, and went back to his room. But the second he walked in, he checked the window anyway, and they were still standing right there, same exact spot as before. And that's when he heard it, a knock on the front door. He tried to look out from his bedroom, but the angle was all wrong. He couldn't see the front of the house from up there. So he headed back downstairs and checked the peephole. And sure enough, there they were, standing right at the door. And that's when the moment it really started to sink in for him that something about this wasn't right. Somewhere deep down, the fear started creeping in, and his mind jumped straight to the How Johnson house, to that electricity cutting out all at once. His heart, what his heart was pounding now. He stepped back from the door, just staring at it. Then another knock came. So he moved quietly toward the window, just enough to get a look at them. That's when he noticed something was off. Their hands looked pale, almost too pale, and their necks were tilted down, just slightly. He still couldn't really make out of their faces. But then one of them moved, head tilted up, slow, deliberate, looking right at him, asking him to let them in. And that's when he saw it. Their eyes, no white, no pupil, Nothing. Just black. Steven stumbled back and dropped onto the sofa, trying to process what he just seen, trying to figure out what these things were. He grabbed his phone and called Matthew, a college kid who lived a few houses down. But the call didn't connect. So he tried again. Same thing. The third time, and it didn't connect. His throat was completely dry at this point. So he headed to the kitchen for some water. And while he was drinking, there was a knock right onto the kitchen window beside him. He didn't even need to look up. He already knew exactly who it was. But he forced himself to turn. And there they were, standing right outside the glass. Both of them spoke at once. Please let us in till our parents come. Same voice, perfectly in sync. And somehow, even though the window, it didn't sound muffled all at all. Like there was no glass between them. Like there was nothing between them at all. Stephen couldn't get a word out. He was frozen, shaking. So he bolted to the front door, through every lock, checked that every window in the house was shut tight. Then ran upstairs and locked his bedroom door. He risked one glance out of the window, but there was nobody there. A few minutes passed. Then another knock came from downstairs. And this time, he didn't move. It kept happening on and off for a while, knocking, then silence, then knocking again, and eventually it just stopped. But Stephen didn't go back down, not for hours. He waited it out until the sun finally came up. Didn't sleep a single minute the whole night. And the next day, he took day off. Barely left his room, only came down for food and water when he really had to. Nothing else happened after that night, but something in Stephen had changed. He started watching his own door and his own windows. Then, a week later, he was out at bar with a friend and somehow it came up. He told him about that night, about this freaky kids that showed up at his door. His friend went quiet for a second and then he told him the truth, that it was a legend, an actual documented thing. Stephen didn't believe him at first, but his friend was dead serious about it. And eventually, he laid out the whole thing, what it was and what it did. That night, back home, Stephen pulled out his phone and started searching. And it was all there, black eyed children, showing up at people's door, asking to be let in, always with the same excuse, waiting for their parents, needing to make a call. He looked over at the Johnson house, and it was still exactly the way it had looked since that night, since those two kids walked through the door. And now he knew exactly what happened there. After that, Stephen stopped watching their neighbors altogether, put the binoculars away for good. But he never stopped watching his own porch, his own door.